Okay, yeah, perfect. Thanks.
So I'm very happy to introduce you to Hans van Tilburg from Visa, who will tell us what's new and what's happening with Visa.
There's no. Let's see. Okay, good. Perfect. Then I just hit this button. That's not who's going to do it. If you just perfect.
Anyway, let's welcome him.
Thanks. So what I want to talk about today is something that when I put it from a perspective like the US is in general not very aware of about what does chip mean and chip security. It has been very common in Europe. We use it for years now. It has been exported out of Canada, and the US recently actually rolled out something about moving to quote-unquote chip, and chip is not chip, so chip depends on what's actually in the chip. So that's something hopefully I can tell you about today, but there's another part that I want to convey too is a chip card is almost like a hardware security module, HSM. It protects certain assets. And so how do we validate that certain chip cards from certain vendors meet those requirements? So we had a program now in place for almost like 15 years, and I want to tell you a little bit about that part. And then the next step is, and something also George told me is, okay, we are moving to mobile. What does that mean? But if you look in the mobile space, mobile is still using chip in most areas. Yesterday, for the first time, there was some kind of a workshop within Global Platform in San Jose, where they were talking about what they call, instead of secure execution environment, trusted secure environment. So it has a lower level of security, but it allows you to negotiate, for example, with the secure element. It allows you to execute, say, a movie from a DRM perspective, and after 2 or 3 hours, that security environment disappears.
You see that black thingy on the table?
Yeah.
That's a microphone, so why don't you stand close
Oh,
to that? I'm
sorry. I didn't realize that at all. I'm not going to repeat, so tough luck for them. So those are the 3 parts of my presentation. It's just the payment basics. Sometimes people don't know what really a payment system does, and they blame me, for example, as a Visa employee, what their bank is doing. So I hope to clarify some stuff in that area, the testing process, and then we go to the mobile part. So when we look at banking in general, it's like from a Visa perspective, I mean, this is kind of biased. So there are other brands like Amex and MasterCard, but we started in the 50s. And this card, I mean, it's just a paper token was used for identification. And that's it. It's all about trust, and people knew each other, and you were part of a community. The community nowadays is like the world, and you don't know who you're talking to, even on Facebook, or it doesn't matter where, what kind of medium you're using. In general, you rely on some of the trust that you build up, but you still don't know what you know. That was different in those days. So that security threats were different. So over the years, we migrated from a Visa perspective to, and also MasterCard, Amex, they were doing more or less the same. It's MaxStripe. We were adding features to this payment, quote-unquote, token to identify yourself, to say okay, it's secure. So a MaxStripe is nice. At that time, it's higher technology. It was more difficult for a lot of people to copy. But that turned out, after 1 or 2 years, not to be true. So then you got cryptography in the 70s, like IBM had their DES, then with RSA, some other encryption technologies were part of the game. And so we started upgrading our process based on fraud and the business case. So there are a lot of things what you still can do just based on an ID perspective from a fraud management perspective. And so even when you go to a chip card today, chip cards are not perfect. So don't get fooled. It's like it's in a chip, it is secure. That's not the case. It's still based on a business case from does it make sense to secure that data in the chip environment. And I will show you later on that there are plenty of cases where chip cards are not secure for payment environments, but for other environments they are fine. So one thing, when we talk about chip, and we look at the form factor like a chip card, you see the chip sitting there, that's a contact chip. So it's a contact, so you put it in a terminal, the terminal reads it, that's the part. So when you actually put it on top of the terminal, the card itself, then you're talking about a contactless chip. So what does that mean? You need to have an antenna. And more or less the antenna interacts with the chip itself. And in general, if the chip allows the antenna and the chip itself, then we call it a dual interface card. So that's one of the things Visa is pushing at the moment into the industry, from support both type of payments. There's a kind of a difference. If I do contact, I can power the card from the terminal. So that means if I look at the chip itself, that all the countermeasures for security can be activated. All the power that I need to execute the applications can be activated, and I am more or less in the highest state of security. When I go to contactless, it depends. When I put the card on the terminal, it depends where you are in the field. So if I'm on the maximum field strength, then it's almost like equivalent to a chip card. But in general, that's not the case. So what are manufacturers doing? They are disabling some of the security features that a normal card would provide. The other part is transaction time. So I need to start interacting with the terminal over a contactless interface. It costs time. Time is money, and people don't want to wait. If you have a target as a store, a merchant, they are very precise. This is what I want from a customer experience. I don't want to wait 2 minutes or something like that. So there are requirements around the completion of a transaction. So that is within half a second, but that is from when you put your card here. And it doesn't matter where it's being settled in the world, back to when you get the message at the terminal side. A half second. That's all. So in the contactless environment, that's a challenge. Contact, it's no issue. And that actually, later on, some of the challenges we are going to talk about in the mobile environment, that's where you get some of those issues. So dual interface, I just mentioned it. You want to do the dipping, and you want so those are the cards that can do both. And we will see them hopefully in the next few years in the United States. They are used worldwide. I have a card. Unfortunately, my card is not Visa. It's a MasterCard because I came from the Netherlands. And Europe is predominantly MasterCard. It used to be Eurocard. Eurocard was bought by MasterCard. So that's kind of so. But from a brand perspective, Visa is almost like twice the size of MasterCard. But that's because we have the US and we have huge volumes in that part. There's another part. US is mainly online. So there's a huge difference. It's like France, for example. Most of the payments are offline. So terminals don't have internet connection. I mean, you assume everywhere where you are, you have internet connection. And if you're a service provider, you know, if your connection is being dropped and all that kind of stuff, you're going to say you're upset. But in Europe, there are a lot of areas where there is no coverage or there's no internet access. So that's why offline payments are very important. So a transaction flow. I'm not going through all the details. I just want to show you how complex actually IMVICO is. And this is one of the criticism about IMVICO, and I think they are right about it. But at the same time, IMVICO doesn't implement a payment scheme. It's MasterCard, it's Visa, JCB, Amex. They are the ones that are deriving their specifications from IMVICO. And then based on that, they can say, okay, we have a subset, and based on the merchant that you're, of the issuer you're using, like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, they can say these are the things we are allowing. So it is complex if you look initially at the whole standard and the specifications, but if you really go to the details in the end, it's not that big of a deal. But some of the important steps are, when I'm at the terminal, up to now you have not seen it, or actually you might have seen it because of the German regulation that came in effect in the United States, that you as an user can pick what kind of payment channel you're going to use. So that means when you are at the terminal, they're going to ask you a debit, credit, Visa, or they are going to ask you several questions. What kind of payment channel are you going to use? Actually, if we go to the mobile later on, and I'm not going to hit on that part again, it's the same thing. With mobile, you get the same questions, because mobile, you need to tell the merchant, in this case, from which of all the tokens that you have in your phone or on your SIM or secure element, doesn't matter, are you going to use for a payment transaction? So you need to make that choice. And then the whole protocol starts. So then we actually initiate the application. Then we read the application data. So it's almost like in this case, and this is the classical case where we have a terminal and we have a card, where you get a negotiation is, I as terminal support this and this and this, and I have those keys. I as card only, it's almost like an SSL, handshake. That's what's going on also on the terminal. Then this part, offline data authentication. This is very important. Like in Europe, a lot of the terminals, it's almost like when I do parking. I go to the terminal, I park, I type in my PIN. That's a data authentication, but it's an offline data authentication. So what the chip and the terminal do, they validate my PIN and that I'm that person there. So what the US is proposing to, or what's being proposed in the US, it's because US people don't like to enter that PIN. It's like have the same user experience, what we have at the moment with our MaxStripe and all the other cards, and we don't enter PIN. Well, because of that, in the US you will not have offline data authentication. So that means for low payments, certain terminals or certain merchants either need to go online, or they cannot transact your payments. But however, in Europe, this is custom. So the card that you might be issued from a US issuer, like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, they might not support this. So when you go to Europe, you might still be declined in this area. So that's why I'm saying chip and chip is not chip. Even in offline data authentication, we have what we call static data authentication. It's like almost like a password. It's every time the same. Then we have dynamic data authentication. It's where we send a challenge to the terminal. And then we have CDA. It's a combined part that actually blocks the man-in-the-middle attack. But all these different schemes require that some information is present in the terminal. And so it means there needs to be a crypto key from Visa. There needs to be one from MasterCard, from JCB, Amex. They all need to be present in the terminal. When that doesn't happen, then you have two decisions that can be made. One decision is from I decline the transaction. That's bad because merchants don't like that. Then the other one is from, okay, we accept the transaction, we go online. And then you get an online presence. But that's only for terminals that can go online. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this area. So when you hear about the US going to chip, yeah, it's chip, but chip, it's a different chip than most of the chips. So a chip is not chip. I hope that's now clear. So then there are processing restrictions. That's always a mandatory step. For example, even in Europe, if I have been offline for 3 times, there are what we call, in the end, card risk management and terminal risk management, and depends what you negotiate. You force the card to go online. So an offline card does not exist in the payment industry. It is only for 3 times, then the card needs to go online, unless the card is broken. And we haven't seen those cards yet. Cardholder verification, it's like PIN, signature, and that's all done like in the SSL handshake. It's in a certain order. And if the terminals support the highest of both, then you agree. If there is no common interest, it just fails, and the whole thing is going to fail. So, and again, this is one of the key things about failing. So what you hear a lot about DDA and CDA in the industry is like dynamic data authentication and combined data authentication. There is one big disadvantage of combined data authentication is like, because it's based on RSA, it's encrypted, but it is encrypted, so it's an explicit encryption. So what does it mean? If I don't have the key, I cannot extract the data from the card. I cannot read it. So by default, it's going to fail. So since most of the terminals don't support CDA, we are going back to the DDA environment. And in the DDA, we can go online and say we have a second step of validation of our card. When we actually we are talking within EMVCO at the moment about moving to ECC. Within ECC, elliptic curve cryptography, we don't have that issue because the lengths are small enough that we can do almost like the message is in plain, and then the next part is only the digest. That's being sent encrypted, and you can validate it. If that fails, then we can still read the original data, and we can take actions based on that. So it's a big part, but that shows you how complex actually this industry is. It's not just something. So just to go back to chip cards, I mean, nice picture. This is more like your PC or your laptop, what you have at the moment. It's we have a RAM, EEPROM, CPU, and it works that way. And the layout on the chip might be different, depending on the technology and what the vendor is doing going forward on their part. But in general, it's just a high-end processor on your chip card, plus actually a co-processor if they want to do RSA or ECC. So what does it mean? Yeah, I have a platform. It's like your HP computer. It's like from, you have your platform. That's what you're building on. You have your operating system. It's the second part. And then you get your applications. It's like the Visa application. This is the payment application, but you have loyalty applications. They are built on top of it. And this is actually, over the years, what we, within the payment industry, how we relied upon. So what we are doing is we are saying on the IC perspective, we are validating which ICs are meeting our minimum requirements. Then the next thing is, and this is actually very recently because of mobile, what we are saying is now we are going to approve this. So it's the IC plus the operating system plus all the additional applications that allow, say, card management remotely, like a global platform, and dynamic loading mechanisms on the card. So that's this part. That's the second part. And then the third part is more or less when we know all this is being certified, and we have a lot of applications here in this area, we are doing delta evaluations and making sure that it works. So this is, if you're talking amounts, maybe some like 20, 30 different chips. You're talking here, at the moment there are only 3 in process, or actually there are none. But on the long term, this will be one of the big things going out. So you have some like 150, everything that's being in the mobile phones. And applications can be any application that you have that's now in Marketplace or in the iStore. That is going to be loaded on that, but it needs to be certified. On the iPhone, it's being certified at the moment through Apple. So that will never pass the industry validation criteria. Marketplace and I mean, we are working actually together to find out from how can we do this. It's still a big issue, but this part is where the business is. So if I have an application around December, say the 2nd, and it's a killing application, you want to make sure that it is being broadcast to all the people and they can buy it. If I have an assurance process and it tells you, yeah, tough luck, 3 months, you're talking about February. Your whole business case is gone, it doesn't work. So in this case where you see you have security, you have the business, and there's friction, and that's why we went up to the whole process like from in layered approaches. So security assets. What are security assets, for example, on a payment card? It's like the PIN, especially as in Europe. In the US, most of the time when you enter your PIN, it's either in an ATM or at a merchant when you want to get some cash back. But the other part is cryptographic keys. You will never see those, and I hope you will never see those. Then the secondary assets, actually this is more or less quote-unquote visible, because if those on the card and they are broken, your card's gone, your account's gone. In this case, there are related security functions like application code. Sometimes application code is confidential, or at least it provides some additional security. We want to protect that. We have transaction data like log files that we want to make sure we protect that and you cannot manipulate it. Same thing when I am in a network perspective, you don't want to manipulate your log files because that if I'm a hacker, that's a bad thing. But in the end, it's everything about the card is more or less the same what we are doing in a network technology or in network systems. We want to make sure that everything is protected. And you protect your primary parts, and when it's the secondary parts, it's like from, okay, what additional risk do I have really in that area? And that actually the secondary assets become more and more apparent in the mobile environment. Because if I can load a malicious application on a phone, in the current card environment, we don't care. The card's in final configuration. In the mobile environment, it's not in the final configuration, so you can do it over air. So I can do post-issuance, and I can do load those applications over the air. If they're not, if they compromise my system, all the applications that are on the system, or a subset of the applications on the system, might be compromised. And so this is a kind of message that I have. I'm not negative about Apple, but you are trusting what Apple is doing. So if someone messes up badly, or they are really able to convey their code in a very nice way, and there's still a trapdoor in there, they can activate the trapdoor afterwards, you are toast. So all these schemes that we are talking about from high assurance, so I'm talking high, Apple's medium, it's where we are trying to avoid that, and we are doing code reviews. So this is actually one of the things, and I don't know how many people are familiar with differential power analysis or power analysis in general. It is something from, you turn on, in the old days it was actually easier, but it is like from you turn on, if you go to instead of electricity, go actually to a gas example where you have a gas pipe coming into your house, and you have some like 11 heaters, and you have your stove and some other parts. Each time when you turn on the stove, it will jump. The meter will jump. And will show you so it is going to leak information. Something is happening at this time. So you can build up a profile. And based on that, you can say, okay, this and this is happening in that area. But if you really go in a more detailed part, you can say wow, hey, this much of energy is being used by this heater. So it's in the guest bedroom someone is turning something on. So you're going to be more specific. But it's the same thing with DPA. At a certain point, I can say this is happening in the multiplication operation on the card. And then, but the operand it's a 1 or a 0. And then it's like, it's definitely a 1 in this area, and that's how you're going to break it. And this is something, it's not new. It's more than 10 years old, and it has been very successfully done over the past 10 years. So it's a major threat. And DPA, so it's when you look at power analysis, is equivalent to something like timing analysis, EM analysis, photonic analysis. When I look at the card from a photonic perspective, is how much information is being leaked. Everything like that is called side channel analysis. Very powerful analysis in the industry. So when we look at evaluations, what is really important is it's like the hacker's approach. It's black box. Do not really have much inside knowledge. From a chip perspective, what you really want is the white box approach, and actually a combination of both. It's you give me the source code, we review the source codes, and these are the things what we observe that is not present in the source code. We think it's a viable attack for a hacker, and then we exploit it. So that's why we are going to the white box approach. Some like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, vendors hated that approach because it relates to IP. They have to share the IP with the security lab and the vendors. They don't want to do that. So that's one of the things. The mindset is finally changing, and there's a business pressure why they have to do it. So the key element here is the vulnerability analysis, that a lab, an independent entity, can do the vulnerability analysis and can say, okay, these are the current threats. How I need to look at this card, this is what I'm expecting from the card, and this is what it is supposed to protect against. And then they need to verify, because it's trust and verify. It doesn't matter which compiler you use, the compiler has bugs in it. So in the end, it is from, this is what was in the code, but we still verify that it has been properly implemented. Because most of the cases, believe me or not, you can have a security option. And this is really realistic. In the crypto area, you have serialization, what they call, it's like after I have a register, then the next step is, I've used it and I don't need to use it, I just erase the message. So there's nothing there. And then I go to the next step. That's done for a reason, because that content of that register is not exactly, it's not later on available in the code. So if you have one of the compilers that are going to go for optimizing the code, is saying, hey, that's redundant code. It doesn't add to my process, get rid of it. And what happens is, like, next time when you execute the whole thing, it's like that whole register is still in the memory. And I can do a dump and I have the key. And believe me, it's like you think okay, that's a very simple example. It's still happening, even in high-end chip cards. So what we do actually when we look at the vulnerability functions in cards, within the world, where there's a kind of a subgroup from vendors, from security labs, and what we call certification bodies like Common Criteria, EMVCO. We meet together each 6 weeks in Brussels to discuss the latest attacks and the ratings, as we call it, and I will get back to the ratings later on. But that's called the JHAS group. It's a closed group, but that's where we more or less make sure that the latest attacks are being addressed. And a lot of stuff actually is being published through, say, Black Hat conferences. Recently there was a conference in Tokyo. Skipped my mind, but there are a lot of conferences in this area where we look at these things. So a lot of the stuff that's being discussed here is not new. It's more the politics. So consider this more as a political group, but it's how we think about stuff. So from a security evaluation perspective, what we do is we set out requirements and guidelines. This is how you need to do it. This is how you need to test the chip cards. We define the full process. One of the key areas is that we define, from a lab perspective, security labs. There's something like 10, 12 labs in the world that are doing chip security testing. And we want to make sure that they are on equal par, that they are doing the right level and the kind of testing. So what we do is we have report requirements. So when we get reports and we look at the security of those chips, we make sure that they are that they cover the same level. So we ensure the consistency across the industry. So when we identify something like new attacks, it's like last year we identified for the first time, if I have a chip, I can inject a fault in one area and then I can do something about it. Okay, that was the standard a year ago. This year the standard is I can inject a fault here and a fault there. So what does that mean? If I'm building integrity in my operation, I cannot just go with the CRC check in a certain way. I need to have an integrity check that has more or less, it doesn't rely on just one other bit, it's two different bits. So when I change one bit, I also need to make sure that if a second bit is being changed, that I am going to protect against that. So that's what the group is doing, that's what we are maintaining, and we are upping the level of security in this area. And we are working with the vendors. It's the hard part, and that's where the politics come into place. And the other parts are quite easy, because most of the time the certification bodies, they have a very specific interest. It's like in the US or in Europe, the electronic passport is a big issue. I'm responsible at a certain point for, or no, not me, but that person in the US is responsible for the electronic passport. And it means that they're going to say hey, all these things, what you are saying there, I don't want that. I don't want it to be based on TDES anymore. I don't want to be, it's like the one-fault laser glitching. It needs to be up to the latest. So these bodies in general help us a lot in going what we want to do. So attacks, from an attacks perspective, if I look at cards, we have the hardware attacks. It's like, it's almost like similar to networks. It's probing, you look at sensors, how can I overcome sensors, and how can I modify some of the traffic? In this case, how can I modify some of the wiring in the chip? Believe me, that's not difficult. Wiring in a chip is only a few layers, and with some of the technology that's going on, it is not that difficult, because you have what we call FIPS. It's focused ion beams. You can read the chip, but you can also change some of the areas in the chip. So when people tell you chips are very difficult, it's not true. It's not true. It is, chips are more or less have the same complexity and all the stuff. It's just at a certain point, what really counts is the nanometers. And this is actually one of the big issues within the financial industry. It's like in the early 2000s, we approved chips based on 600 nanometer technology. Today, we are approving chips based on 60 nanometer technology. And what you see now is that some of the attacks that are not possible on 60 nanometer technology are being valid for the 600. And the vendors that didn't migrate, but what they did is they just patched and patched and patched. So I just go back as an attacker. I go to a product in 2005. I break it. Then I just do a delta. I need to do a delta and a delta. And now I can break the 60 nanometer product. This is one of the big problems, and that has been identified, luckily enough, in the industry, and people are addressing it. But one of the things, if I look at a Visa card, for example, or a MasterCard, it doesn't matter which card it is. The card is being issued in 2005, or approved in 2005. In general, it has a lifetime of 6 years. So then after 6 years, I can have another lifetime for something like 5 years. And then I can have some, what they call exceptions. So a card that was approved in 2005 can be in the field for another 10, 15, in some cases 20 years. It depends on the industry. And that's why it's very important that from a chip card perspective, and when you do security evaluations, that you are not going to say, I agree with you, the delta is more or less acceptable. No, it will be in the field for a long time, and a few years on the road, and it's in my case, I will not even be there, but those cards will become an issue. So that's why testing is being done. So we have a kind of a scientific approach, and I will go a little bit fast through this part. But we look at time, skills, tools, attacks, the cost. And so each thing is, if I have a card and I need to do first a kind of ascending, look at the card, do kind of reverse engineering and all those kind of steps, those are going to become a factor. And you know, the nice thing about vector space is you can add them up like this. So I have one here, one there. So this is one earlier effort, I can add them. And in the end, I have a kind of a work factor for a certain attack. So I break those attacks down. And in the end, it's like everything that's under this is going to be acceptable. The other one will be a card that has certain risks. And then depending on how long it's being used, it can be acceptable, but in general, it will not be acceptable because technology, believe it or not, because I think this is the part. We as people, we are thinking in a certain way linearly, and but from an attack perspective of technology, it's going exponential, and we do a very bad job about projecting how secure something can be 2 or 3 years from now, because we are thinking this way, and the technology is there, and there are a lot of changes coming up, especially in the chip area. So some of the attacks and the technology, how we test chip cards at the moment, is going to completely change within 3-4 years from now. And the photonic part, where we start looking at what's really happening on photonic level, is one of the key areas of research at the moment. So we have a rating, and the rating is more or less, we want to have a kind of an objective measure from, okay, what can we do about cards? So we want to reduce the subjectivity. Originally, it's more or less based on common criteria. Common criteria is a nice concept, but it's an assurance concept. It's not a security concept. So if I approve something like, and I say, okay, these are the things that I want to certify through common criteria, I get a certificate. It's valid as the date you pass the certification. Afterwards, it doesn't matter. Microsoft went through Windows 2000 with the common criteria evaluation, did everything. So the common criteria suite was approved. But you know, the next day they had a patch. Tough luck. The patch, if you want to run the common criteria approved environment, you couldn't use the patch. So it was vulnerable from a security perspective. So be very aware what you are barking for. Same thing with FIPS in the United States. We have different levels. Always look what is being claimed. So factors that we use for the ratings are the elapsed time, expertise. It's like you're a novice person, or actually I will give an example there, and I have twice. But it's also the knowledge. If it's secret or it is in a restricted environment, people know about it, or if it's public knowledge, how can I gain access to it? It's like your Visa card or your payment card. In general, you don't. It's only one card, and so the keys on there are personalized for you. So in order to break it for you, they only have one try on one card, and it will fail afterwards. So anyway, they look at that part and use the equipment. Is it high tech? And actually, what we see in the current environment is equipment is getting more and more expensive. And that's from my perspective, I'm doing a lot of R&D projects now with the labs, but also with universities, because sometimes they have the access to the big money, because you're talking about millions of dollars for some equipment. So from an expertise perspective, it's like layman, proficient, expert, and multiple experts. And what you will see, actually, this is the part what's more or less going like this at the moment, because people. It's like 100 years ago, you were just educated to do one job, but nowadays you're an expert in coding, crypto, and other stuff. So anyway, this is kind of an artificial category, but it's still important to show that there is a kind of difference between an expert and a multiple expert. So from a mobile perspective, I mean, there's not much difference. In the mobile phone, we are using the same secure chip. It's in there, and all the processes and the procedures, what we are doing, it's exactly the same. However, there's a change. There are multiple applications. So we have the Visa app, we might have the MasterCard app, we might have Netflix, we might have all kinds of other applications there. And so they're starting interacting. It's like Java is nice, but you know there are security issues with Java. The sandbox is not perfect. So what we are talking about is application firewalling. So when we test the cards from a platform perspective, is we are looking at applets separation. So how can we separate the different applications on the firewall? What kind of assurance can we get there? It's a very difficult topic because in general, at a high level, most of the application, it's very easy to say they are not hostile. But you have, and actually it was demonstrated in the iPhone, you have applications where you would just change one bit, or when you have a backdoor in the code, and suddenly from a very nice application, it becomes a hostile application, and you can attack the card. So this is a big R&D issue at the moment in our industry, and we talk a lot about it. So the other part is, why is this so important, is because in the mobile environment, there's post-issuance. It's like from you at the end decide from, I'm going to download these and these applets on my card. At the moment, it's more or less in your phone. But just think that you are downloading it into your card. So there need to be mechanisms in place for how can we ensure that we know that the right application is being loaded, it's not a malicious application and stuff like that. And we don't want really to do a virus scan on each application because it's kind of useless in this case. So one thing, and this is the conference I was alluding to earlier, it's like it was yesterday, this was the big topic that was going on. Instead of a secure execution environment, on phones you have now, they are trying to define, like ARM, a trusted security environment. And that means that it has a lower level of security, but you can execute some of the applications that you want to run. For example, Angry Birds or something like that, if it had some security impact, but at least you can load it into a validated environment, almost like in a sandbox that has been created more or less from a bootstrapping perspective. It's like I have a key here, I create my OS on top of it from a bootstrapping perspective, application, so everything is trusted on top of that. It's still possible to change some of the environmental parts, so that's why it's a medium security environment, but it is much better. But it's for most applications, they don't require that high security as a payment application. And the other thing is, because it accommodates the business needs, if I'm there in December, on December 5th, and I say hey, this is a big application or something like that I want to use, it's very easy to certify and run in a TE, not in a secure environment. So this is more or less, in a nutshell, the whole thing about chip security and the mobile area. And but in the mobile area, there are a lot of changes, and there are a lot of challenges and that need to be resolved. But it's a fascinating area. So.
My first question is, why is it that people get upset at you?
Upset at me?
Yeah, remember you began the description since you work for Visa?
Yes. Actually, no. It's more the vendors that get upset, and they say what they are asking is from, hey, I have a market need, I want to do this and this and this. But in general, when you talk to a vendor, you have to be very careful. You need to ask them very specific questions. It's like from what is really your need and what are you trying to do. If they are saying from, okay, I just want to be in this market for this and this purpose, it's like, okay, you need to follow the requirements. But if they are in a kind of a niche market, in general, what we have within Visa, and it's actually in all the other payment schemes, we have a kind of a waiver process or a pilot process where they get exemptions to some of the requirements. And so actually in the mobile environment, we have had that now. The whole mobile projects within Visa are more or less from a security perspective in a pilot environment. It's on a wafer environment. And till we establish the real market need from what is needed. But if they are going to reuse some of the cards that are being used in the field, sorry, there's no deviation from that path. So, and then the other parts in the mobile environment, that's different from the chip card environment, because a chip card is something like $1, so it's pretty expensive. In the mobile, actually, the SIM is also expensive, and this probably I didn't mention, and that is a few years from now, you want to say, okay, this is what I want on my card. I want to pick if I want to use AT&T. I want to pick if I want to use a Verizon or a MasterCard or a Visa application. So you buy your own SIM. And based on that SIM, okay, now you get to the part, you might have a very cheap SIM, a medium SIM, and a high-level SIM. Based on your needs as an end consumer, you're going to say okay, I buy this medium one, okay, but that means you cannot load payment application. You say, okay, it's fine, I just want to play games and other stuff. You do that. If you buy the high one, you pay a little bit more money. But now you can download some of the high-end applications. So what you probably will see in an iPhone store or in other stores is the differentiation between security levels of applications. We don't see that at the moment. But that's the consumer-centric model that is almost like obviously to happen. It's like it doesn't make sense that an AT&T is going to tell you what you can do and what you cannot do on your phone. It's like you as an end user, you're going to tell them hey, sorry, this is what I want. Hey, me, this is what I want on my application. And you better serve my needs. That's a completely different thinking. A lot of people don't know it. But when we go back to the 80s, we had all the telcos, the PTTs, the postal, telegraph, and telecommunication organizations. It's like you were not even a customer. You are just a subscriber to the network. So if you look at GSM, that was developed in the 80s, there's only an authentication to the subscriber. So as a subscriber, you never authenticated your telco because, hey, you had no cloud whatsoever. There was only one telco in your country. And that's the whole thing. But it's only 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But that's how things are moving. And it's moving rapidly. So it's not going, again, like linear. It's going this way. So the whole consumer-centric model, don't be surprised that is here within the next 2 years.
Other questions?
Can you speak to within cryptographic systems why certificate authorities are considered safe and trusted? Like, what is it about them?
Yes, and in a certain way, I have to be very careful there, because when you talk about the CA, it's the foundation of a PKI. And the big thing at the moment within PKIs is, and there are some recent papers about it, it's that the PKI that's in place at the moment, where people rely on trust that's provided in browsers, is not that great. And so, like from a Visa perspective, again, I'm sorry that I used the name. I don't want to do that, but it is, we have our own CA. We don't trust the other CAs for that reason. And I think there's a flaw at the moment in the whole PKI environment where, and actually in the Netherlands recently there was a big kind of compromise from Notaris or something like that, where a CA provider issued almost like bogus CAs, or certificates. So if that certificate, you would rely on a certificate, you would have been compromised. And so be very careful about CAs. It's again, it all goes back to the simple expression trust but verify. It helps from a business perspective and it's low level, but I think what people are saying from a CA perspective and a PKI perspective, unless you have online, and this is actually the key word, and that is actually also from a payment perspective, if you have the online verification, great. If it's not, then you need to start thinking about your business model. If it's only, for example, from a payment perspective, it's only $10. Okay, we can buy it. I mean, most of the payments are low, and it's fine, and they're not fraudulent. But it then depends on your risk model.
Any other questions? Well, thank you.
That has been the big tension because they don't want to share information. And then at some point it's like, we have to share, but that's why we have those requirements on the labs. We have only 12 labs worldwide. Yeah, I did. Thanks. No, but that's exactly the case.
It seems like these systems, no matter how secure they are, there's always some.
We'll have to wait till the rains come. Does it come from Marshall Dean's? No. A little further away. He's across the street from me. This is right in front of me. I've been there for 27 years. There's 26 years there was no problem. The county came along to do some maintenance work. They were cleaning out drainage. They cut a brand new one in front of my neighbor's property in my driveway. Then they didn't put a culvert under their driveway. Guess what? All the mud washes under my driveway. And I drive through there, and my car goes. Oh boy. So I've been dealing with that. Fortunately, I was up there. They actually came out to fix it last Tuesday, and I just happened to go out for a run there. And I stopped, and they were discussing over whether or not they really should do what their boss was going to do. And they were going to put a dump of load gravel in this pit. I said, the state was some trouble. He's going to dump it in my right. And they were, so they let up. Back today. The joys of home ownership. But the lesson from you go up the chain of command, and I can't believe it. I mean, I wrote that letter a week ago to my supervisor, and they let it out.
Okay, guys, good afternoon. So today we might be able to finish our discussion of that GDP accounting. If we don't, we'll start with this on Tuesday, and then we'll start chapter 9, which is looking at this issue of aggregate output and productivity, but then doing some international comparison. So we're going to look at first, how do you explain why some countries see their national output and income, like the US, grow over time, right? Remember the graph I showed you for GDP? We've had, continuous growth almost since, they said, 18 something. And why in some countries, you don't have this nice upward trend when it comes to GDP. So there's chapter 9. We start with a bit of theory, but the rest is really more about empirics, and it's a bit more international than the chapter we have done so far. I will put together the next assignment today, and that's going to be on, as I said, the end of chapter 7 about nominal or real GDP. So I want to make sure you do one calculation on that with GDP deflator and how you get the inflation rate from this. And then it's going to be on chapter 8. And relative to chapter 8, I'm going to have you read a quick article that's it's like 5-page from the Federal Reserve in San Francisco, and that's looking at it's called the U.S. content of Chinese import. So Chinese import in the U.S. And so I'll touch on briefly why, when you look at trade data, which we'll do today, the statistics are a bit misleading when it comes to understand exactly, how much value is really imported from China as opposed to just, it's just a part of it it's really Chinese production. Okay, so before I start, do you have any questions? So I will email you once I post the homework on Moodle. I'll send a class email, and then you know that it's what we do no matter what next Thursday. Okay, so let's review briefly what we were discussing. All right, so we're trying now that we all know what GDP is, we're basically looking at different ways we actually estimate that national production, right? So how do we come up with a number like $15 trillion for this year? Where does that come from? So the first thing that we've done is to look at the first method that can be used to calculate GDP, and that's called the spending approach. So that's when you basically try to track that production the moment it's actually purchased by someone in the US or overseas. Okay? And using an example, I think it was a car, I showed you that you can regroup spending on US production in 4 subcomponents. The C stands for